these issues for Gen Z are not fringe, they're not off to the side, they're front and center. And in fact, there was a huge Gen Z swing in the New York City mayoral race for these populist policies. And I don't want to dismiss that. And people want to do this whole like, oh, well, he's a Muslim and Sharia law. I don't think that's what he ran on, though. This guy ran on Gen Z policies. And I think it's something where, call me crazy, but Gen Z, they don't want the, oh, we're going to go to war abroad talk. They want more of the, we're going to make life better at home, at the home front kind of level. So give me, or give us the audience-wise an understanding of where Gen Z stands on this question and these very serious questions in terms of their priority matrix when it comes to government.
I mean, yeah, I think Mamdani, I mean, regardless of what you think about him, I mean, he's a communist, he's a socialist. I think all those things are true. But again, populism is a tool. It is not an ideology that pigeonholes anybody into a corner. It is an idea that he goes out, the populist goes out and meets with his people, meets with Gen Z, specifically because he is a part, or at least closely related to that population and that age demographic. You know, he's going out and saying, I want to lower the food costs on like Indian food carts. Like I forget what that exact dish that he posted about was, but he was literally talking about lowering one food dish that's a street product from $10 to $8. He's talking about, you know, taking over grocery stores and making items cheaper for the New York City public. He's talking about, you know, lowering rent. He's talking about things that mean something to people. Groceries, food, housing. These things do land. Now, you have all of these, you know, the LGBTQ stuff, you have the race pandering, all those things that conservatives like me and the traditional American do not agree with and do not want to hear about, but he is using that populist mantra to communicate with Gen Z in a way probably no other New York City mayoral candidate has before, and that's why he beat Cuomo. But regardless of betting markets, regardless of, you know, the presumption that a former governor was going to win a mayor's race, he dominated that conversation, and he did make it about himself. I mean, he was known about 2 months ago as this radical Islamic populist, and people kind of brushed him off. But I mean, in the last weeks of the campaign, he really concentrated that populist message. And you know, populism doesn't necessarily mean that we need to cave on principles. Populism doesn't mean that we can't hold those traditional conservative values, but it does mean that things like MAGA and other political movements can utilize the populist movement into knowing what the middle class and low propensity voters care about, to have that turnout, to turn out Gen Z as they did in that election. And it was the difference in New York City. And Gen Z was the difference in President Trump's election in 2024 because of being things like anti-war, pro-middle class, pro-working class. It's one of the reasons why that coalition was catered to and gotten by Donald Trump in 2024. So populism needs to be utilized by conservatives nationally, it needs to be used by conservatives globally. And if we're able to keep on facilitating that over the next 10 years, MAGA can really have really capitalize on Gen Z and the future generations by solely just using those populist mantras.
And so, Kenny, this is what we're talking about here, and I think this is absolutely central, not just to the MAGA message, but even to the debate on the big, beautiful bill, because they say, oh, we're just getting rid of this policy item, this line item, that line item. Now, they haven't touched the no tax items, which I think are massive, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. But it sounds like what you're saying is that Gen Z as a cohort, which, by the way, votes at a very higher clip than we've seen the youth vote in the past, or the current, I think it's 18 to 29 right now, votes much higher. 60% of them broke from Zoran in this one. But you also saw a lot of Gen Z going for Trump, particularly Gen Z males. And I think a lot of this has more to do. So certainly there's a backlash to wokeness. But what comes after that? Okay, we're anti-woke, but what do we want? We want that right now money, right? Congress is up there dragging its feet. And so they're going to say, I want something that's going to help me right now, right here, right now. Not 5,000 miles away, 6,000 miles away, right now, right here. Because look, the Trump stuff, they'll talk about this, but you know what? We want something that's food, that's rent. You're talking about things that affect people on a regular basis and a daily basis. And Kenny, you and I could sit here and talk about, Milton Friedman till we're blue in the face and bring up all the great work of Thomas Sowell and so many others about, rent control and poverty and grocery stores and how all this leads to the situation. but we're talking about electoral politics. And when it comes to Gen Z specifically, this rhetoric and these policies are extremely popular. And I think that's something that, I'm just going to say it, I think that's something that a lot of Republicans in D.C. haven't quite updated themselves on yet.
100%. I mean, Congressman Gates said it earlier. Do you not want to win? And these issues win. These strategies win. If we can absolutely, make a coalition of populists and nationalists that are proud of their country but want their children taken care of. That's why you saw backlash to the LGBTQ movement. They're seeing their children be indoctrinated by these social abnormalities, by nonprofits that are pushing this, by social media stars that are pushing the transgender movement. The reason that you're seeing people go away from that is because of populism. It has become popular to go against this evil Marxist ideology. In the same way, it's been popular for no taxes on tips, and it's not really that complimentary for the Senate to keep that in, because it literally got 100-0, one of the first 100-0 votes that I've ever seen in nearly a quarter of a century on one bill. They actually passed and approved tax on tips, or no tax on tips, right? Because it is a populist mantra. But they're leaving out the things that they think can be skewed, things like immigration, and things like Matt Gaetz was talking about with AI. There are a lot of issues that may be 50-50, may be 60-40, but the GOP is responsible for delivering on President Trump's agenda. These senators that were up for re-election in 2024 literally went to their states and said, we are going to pass one big, beautiful bill. We're not going to pass, 3 or 4 bills in a span of 3 or 4 years. We're going to pass one big, beautiful bill on the issues that you all voted President Trump and me as a senator in to vote for and in to put into the agenda. Now they're dragging their feet. Now they're looking for excuses to take specific representatives out, to take specific issues out of one bill. And that's not what Gen Z voted for. That's not what the MAGA movement voted for. This is not what even independents voted for. They are for a transparent legislative policy that is going to cover the bases that President Trump campaigned on, and these senators and congressmen and even local leaders campaigned on. And we need to deliver on that. And we shouldn't let a government bureaucrat that's been there since 2012 for 13 years just override elected officials, and most importantly, the man who got elected president of the United States in November.
And I think what you're walking through here is, so you've got populism is the name of the day. Populism is the name of the day. And President Trump won because of populism. But then along comes Zoran Mandami. And what does he do? He brings up the populist left. So there's two versions of populism, one of which is the populist left, one of which is the populist right. The populist right is MAGA. The populist left is this. You get this sort of infusion of the popular policies, but then he goes a step further and says, and we're going to strip all the money from the landlords, and we're going to go after all of the people who are successful, and we're going to give you all sorts of free stuff like crazy. And this shows, I think, Kenny, the danger of not following through on the MAGA populist agenda when it comes to economics, because these guys are going to come up now and start offering free stuff all over the place, and they do not care what they burn down and how many billionaires and millionaires move out of New York City and take jobs with them, because that's what they're all about. This type of rhetoric becomes very, very popular when you are in situations where that the haves versus the have-nots, the lower class feel like they're being completely unheard and completely unregarded. And I think a lot of Gen Z feels that way.
100%. And one thing, like the biggest tweet that I've seen on Twitter involving Mamdani is that queer liberation is defunding the police. Like a statement that makes absolutely no sense in general, right? There's no dictionary definition as to what that actually means, but it's key words, right? Like you're placating to the far left by including those two phrases, queer liberation and defunding the police. For some reason, those two phrases coincide with a lot of those far left Gen Z Democrats or progressives. And if they hear that, they're like, Andrew Cuomo isn't saying that, Eric Adams isn't saying that, no other candidate's saying that, but I'm hearing Mamdani say it, and I'm going to relate to that. Now, populism can be simplistic. It can be a way to start a conversation on one topic and lead into the enclaves of policy and others. But Mamdani did a pretty good job about recruiting those kinds, and that's why populism can also be dangerous for the left. And if MAGA doesn't use it, it can be dangerous for us too, because this is now the name of the game. We are no longer the country club Republicans of the past. We are not country club conservatives or neoconservatives. We are now a populist nationalist movement. And that's what these current senators that are not pushing the Big Beautiful Bill need to learn from. You need to learn that the modern voter of today is not for the country club, small town fundraisers that you can go and talk to your biggest donors about what you're going to vote for. They want to see action now on the issues that they voted Trump and MAGA in to do, all wrapped up in one beautiful bill. And they need to be able to capitalize on those populist sentiments and make the Republican Party a nationalist populist party like it's been the last 10 years and keep it that way for future generations.